Hi everyone, welcome back to Extra Reps with Adrienne. In this episode, we're going to be talking about my childhood and my high school journey, all the trials, the highs and the lows that I went through to get to college volleyball and just finishing my 6-year college volleyball career. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so like I talked about in the last episode in the little intro video, I obviously have just gotten done playing at West Virginia University. I played at Florida State, and I mentioned that I'd been through some trials, that I had some injuries and setbacks that shaped me into who I am today. And so not only did those happen before college volleyball, but they happened a lot earlier, and some were totally unexpected. Never would have imagined them happening to me or anyone my age. So growing up, we're going to backtrack a little bit. Growing up, my family is a big volleyball family. My mom played in college. I have a few aunts and cousins that also participated. So volleyball's always been a part of my life in this journey. So, and sports in general. And when I was growing up, I kind of was like, I like volleyball, but I want to do something different. I wanted to play basketball and volleyball in college. I wanted to play soccer in college. I wanted to blaze my own trail. And eventually, I didn't like running so much, so soccer kind of got cut. And then, basketball got too physical, so that was the next one to go. And volleyball was just that one true passion that I had, and obviously helped that I was pretty good at it and had some family that could help coach me along the way, and the strategy behind the game of volleyball in and of itself. And so that's where my passion kind of fell, and I started to set these goals for myself. And my mom coached Max Holt, who just played in the Olympics, and he's played pro for a while. He won a national championship at Penn State. And ever since watching him play, I wanted to be just like him. I wanted to play pro volleyball. I wanted to go and try for the Olympics. And he has always been my role model for that. And I knew it was going to take a lot of hard work, and my mom and family members would tell me, this is what it's going to take. You've got to do all these things. You got to be the hardest working person in the gym. You have to do all these extra reps, doing things when no one's looking. So I knew what it was going to take, and I was pretty determined and stubborn that, I was going to make it happen no matter what. I just didn't realize how hard at times that journey was going to be and that path was going to be. So going into high school, my goal was to make the varsity team as a freshman. And I also had a lot of expectations on myself to accomplish that, and not just to make it because my mom was an assistant coach, but to really prove myself and earn that spot. And freshman year, I was not the same physical body that I am now. I was probably 5'8", maybe 5'10" my freshman year, little tiny thing. But I loved volleyball. I was passionate about it. I was loud on the court, and I knew I wanted to be there and to compete. And so luckily I was able to earn my spot, and I was setting in the back row, hitting in the front row. And, it was everything that I could have wanted going into my freshman year. I had a pretty good season, got some recognition, and was like, okay, this is what it's going to take. This was a good first year, good building block. We're going to move on from this. And it was my first year of playing at the highest level for my club team, for the national team that upcoming spring. And back then, the NCAA's recruiting rules were a little bit different. So colleges could be in contact with you a lot earlier, unofficially, and kind of, send emails to your coaches and stuff like that. And so I knew that this season was going to be a big one for me because I was a setter and probably going to go as a setter for college. And setters normally get taken first in this recruiting journey. So I was prepared. I was a little nervous. It was my first time playing on this team, and they were really good. I'd heard all about them. I was the newcomer to the team and hoping to, again, earn that starting spot and make an impact on my team, and to then obviously set up future things for myself with talking to all these colleges and having a good season. So going in, I knew it was going to be a challenge, a whole new system. They were all comfortable with the coaches and how they trained, and I was a new fish in this pond. So I had to kind of remind myself, and my parents helped a lot, that I was capable. I was good enough to be there. or else they wouldn't have asked me to try out for the team, and not to doubt myself so much that, even though I came from a smaller D2 school for high school, that I was physically and mentally prepared to be a part of this team. And so then, I also did track in the spring. I really liked to high jump. I, was pretty good at it. I was really close to setting some records, set my like grade school record for high jump, and I was well on my way to setting the high school record my freshman year. And I always had knee pain, and it was always something I struggled with from growing too fast. But, I take a couple ibuprofen, wrap it up, tape it up, whatever I needed to do, put my sleeve on and go play. Especially volleyball, the adrenaline gets going. I didn't even think about it anymore. And I was just ready to go play, to give it my all. And then afterwards, we'd ice it and deal with the pain then, maybe another ibuprofen or two. So I was at a track meet, and this was the first track meet of my high school season, my high school career. And this was like the weekend or 2 weeks before one of the biggest tournaments for my club team. I think I had played in like maybe 1 or 2 club tournaments at this point. And so they were a little bit smaller, not as big, but I was starting to get some college recognition, which was really exciting. That's what I've been working for. And they were some good schools that were interested. So as a, however old, 13, 14-year-old kid, I was out of this world excited, just so pumped to be getting recognition letters, and seeing the coaches standing around our club courts was really cool. And I always loved playing in front of, the crowds, and, the more people that were there, the better. Like, I was going to put on a show, and I loved that energy and the atmosphere. So I was at my first track meet, and I think at this point I was going to tie the school record, which was like 5.2, I believe. And so, again, my knee, I had KT tape on my knee. I had one of the like bands that goes around your knee for the Osgood Slaughters. And I also had a compression sleeve on my left knee. So that was 3 like different preventative things on this knee to just hold it in place so I could keep competing. And the only thing that would have ever healed and made that pain go away was just rest, because it was just from growing too much. My growth plates are still wide open. And, I wasn't going to take any time off. I had things to do and places to go. So first attempt at 5.2, I plant my left leg to go up to jump, and I hear kind of a pop, and I just kind of fall like sideways into the pit instead of going up and over the bar. And at that point, I thought I tore my ACL. They tell you all about it. Those are the 3 worst letters an athlete can ever hear. And when I heard the pop, I thought that's exactly what I had done. And so I kind of laid there on the mat and started crying, just because I knew what this meant. I knew that if it was my ACL, it was going to be a long road to recovery. I wasn't going to be able to play volleyball that season. And, what is that going to look like moving forward? How am I going to recover? Am I going to be good enough to get recruited by all these good schools again? So as I'm laying there crying, my mom comes over. They bring an athletic trainer over. And I just remember also feeling, I don't know if it was embarrassed or disappointed, but because I was going for the record, it was the first track meet, and I was a freshman. My like high school track team was all basically like standing around watching, and that happened. And I was just kind of like, didn't know what to do. You're a freshman, like you want to impress the upperclassmen, and they're all standing there watching because they know that this was such a big deal. So for that to happen was kind of like a heartbreaking moment too. But the athletic trainer comes over, and she starts, taking off the compression sleeve, takes off everything, moving my leg around to check to see if it's an ACL tear. And I was in so much pain, like excruciating pain, as she's moving my leg around. And all I was like, please just stop moving it. It hurts. So she tells me that everything feels fine, and she thinks it's okay. I don't remember what exactly she said was wrong with it, but she was like, your ACL, all your tendons are fine. Like, you're good. But I was like, well, I can't walk. So I stand up and put a little bit of weight, my leg kind of gives out, and I had to kind of hobble away. And then we obviously have to leave, and so leave mid-meet, and they bring a gator over, luckily for me, to like ride to the car in, because I was not able to walk. And I'm just kind of in the backseat crying because I think it's my ACL, even though she said it wasn't. But then why can't I walk? And it was just all these mixed feelings. We go to the orthopedic like office, they take an x-ray, and they're like almost kind of frantic, and they're like, you need to go down to Children's Hospital. And so, I was like, okay, why do I need to get like rushed down there? So we go down there, we get into the room finally, and the doctor does the same thing, starts manipulating my leg, and again, excruciating pain. I'm like, please stop, it hurts. Finally, they stop, and they say the same thing, like, well, I don't know, like, what's really wrong. Your x-rays look fine, and your ACL is not torn, so I don't really know why they sent you here. And we're all just so confused because my pain tolerance is really high. And so for me to not be able to walk and to just be kind of told like, you're fine, was very confusing. So we go back. They had given me a leg brace, I think, or like a leg cast kind of thing, and then crutches. And then we went home. The next day we went back to the orthopedic office, and the doctor walks in, and he's like, in my however many years of doing this, I've never seen anything like this, which is never good to hear when you're hurt, because you'd like for it to just be a routine injury that they can fix up and send you on your way. And he tells me that basically what happened was my growth plate, because there was already such a big gap, or a gap in it from still growing, that the x-ray makes it look like it's fine, but really my patellar tendon pulled my growth plate off of my tibia and like kind of pulled it away. So I kind of fractured like that growth plate tibia area. So in order to heal it, I was in a cast from my ankle to my hip, like the brace, not an actual cast, but a brace. And I was on crutches, and I had to be in a wheelchair for a month because it had to be locked out straight, and crutching around with my leg straight was just not working. So we got a wheelchair, rented a wheelchair for a month, and then had to go to school. And I slept on the first floor of my house because it was so hard to get up and down stairs. Taking showers was a whole nother adventure because I can't bend my leg, so I had to be sitting, and it was definitely a hassle to move, just do simple things around the house, like to go get food. I had to have help. I'm on crutches, so it takes me, an extra 5 minutes to get anywhere. At school, I got to leave early because I was in a wheelchair, and there were people in my class that would always ask like, oh, I'll take you so I can get out of class early. And I didn't care whoever came with me to help, but it was just funny. Like, everybody was like, yeah, we'll help you, it's okay, like we'll take care of you, and we'll push you up the hill to like get to the other class, or like to the other building. So after a month of being in that, and then finally, I was able to get my quad strength back. I went to days and days and days of PT, just to like get my muscle back. And I'll see if I can insert some pictures of like when I was going through all of this, like how little I already was, and then how much smaller my leg went and got because I wasn't using my muscles. And it also happened in the spring. So because I had to wear that cast all the time, if I wanted to go sit outside and like do my homework, I would wear my brace. Well, then it kind of gave me, like, we called them my tiger stripes on my leg, because I would get tan where the brace wasn't, and then the other parts would be white. And the doctor was like, well, at least I know you're wearing your brace, so I'll take it. And then I went to club practices, and obviously like couldn't really do anything. I couldn't even shag because I was on crutches for so long. And even when I was off, I didn't want to risk like getting hit or run over, or like, misstepping while shagging balls and running around the gym. So couldn't do a whole lot there, which was frustrating, but still went to every practice, was still a part of the team as much as I could be. And a lot of the college coaches started to ask like, well, what's wrong? Like what happened? And they started to either offer like a different person, like whoever was, either maybe they were before me or after me in their recruiting list, but because they didn't know exactly what happened, They were worried, and you don't necessarily want to take a chance on someone with a full leg brace injury right away as a freshman, which is understandable, obviously, but obviously it's also frustrating. So then after that, we went to nationals. We made it to the finals. I still wasn't able to play, but we made it to the finals. It was super exciting, and was just a really cool atmosphere to be a part of. So after that, I was finally over the summer cleared to start doing things, small workouts and movements again. And then high school season rolled around, and my high school coach didn't want to really like push me to come back too early, obviously, and get hurt. So I technically tried out. I just didn't play in like some of our preseason tournaments because he didn't want to risk the injury, which again is fine with me. And so then I was able to just kind of take stats, help the girls out as much as I could. So that sophomore season, I finally get back to playing normal. I'm doing good and having a really good season. And it was after the first match of the season. My mom was coaching the JV team at that point. And so she invited, or we were over at one of my best friend's houses now, but at the time I didn't really know her all that well. But we were over at this girl's house and having team bonding for them. But obviously I went because my mom was their coach. And one of the freshmen made the comment to me like, I didn't realize like you were that good. And everyone just kind of laughed. And I kind of laughed too, like, I don't know what you're really talking about. And she was like, no, like, because you were hurt and then you came out today and you looked like nothing even happened. Like you just were out there playing and you didn't look worried or concerned at all. Like that was awesome. And I kind of was like, well, thanks. Like I appreciate it. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, I don't ever want someone to think like I'm going to use my injury as like an excuse for why like bad things happen. If I didn't have a good game that day, if I was going to blame it on my leg. And I never wanted that. So little did I know that would be, the first round of battling all of those comments, or not those comments, but like the internal of not wanting that to be the victim. Like I didn't want to play the victim card. And so went through that season, had a really good year. Then we get to spring and I'm trying out for my club team again, make the same team, and super excited to be back. And we're all full force. We're a year older. We all just had really good seasons again for high school. And now it's time to like really get going on this college commitment stuff. So I went on a bunch of visits that spring, like while we would be going to tournaments. I was getting emails all the time. It was a little overwhelming. And to be honest, my mindset, like as much as I love playing in front of people, the stress of trying to decide like where the right fit is and what college is right for me at 15 years old was pretty hard. And to think that like I had to do that is pretty crazy. But I started to kind of struggle at tournaments because of the stress and because of how just like nervous I was about making the right decision and where I wanted to go to accomplish all my goals. So I ended up later in that spring, right before my birthday, because I said I was going to do it before my birthday. So on my birthday, I could get a bunch of gear as my presents. My final three schools to make my decision between were Florida State, Minnesota, and Ohio State. So Ohio State, I wasn't a huge fan of campus, and as much as I'd love to have stayed, in Ohio and represent, it just wasn't the right fit for me. And they also had someone else that was super interested. So she ended up going there and playing her 4 years there. And Minnesota was my top choice, I guess. They're really good. They're still really good. Their coach was a former Olympic coach. They're in the Big Ten, best volleyball conference in the country. Their facilities were amazing. And the only thing I didn't like about it was on my visit, it was -20 and we were walking around like it was no big deal. Meanwhile, I had like 3 coats on and leggings on under my like sweatpants to stay warm. It was crazy that they were acting like it was no big deal. But that was the only downfall that I saw. And then Florida State was really pretty. I obviously loved that it was warm weather, and it was I wasn't sold on it right away because I was so just, googly eyes over Minnesota. And then it came down to Florida State offered me a full ride, and Minnesota only had 3 years available because of some redshirting and different scholarship reasons. They would have only had three years available. And at the time, we couldn't afford to send me out of state and to not have any like help with the whole year. So Florida State kind of became my default, I guess, pick, which not very many people know. So this may be interesting for some people to hear. But yeah, Florida State wasn't like my ideal pick at first. I was almost like disappointed in myself that I picked Florida State because I had said since I was like an 8th grade freshman in high school, I wanted to play in the Big Ten. So I thought I was disappointing other people by going to the ACC and, not living up to all these goals that I had set. And also being in Ohio, you don't hear much about Florida State, so it doesn't build that increasing like excitement because nobody's talking about Florida State in Ohio. But once I got down there again and went to camp and I was with the girls, I just began to fall more and more in love with it. And when you're down there, obviously everyone is a Florida State fan or a Florida fan, but those don't really count. So I loved it. I was obsessed with Florida State. Everything I owned was Florida State. Because I committed as a sophomore, I had 3 years worth of time to get all this Florida State gear before I even stepped foot on campus. And I was so proud to wear it. I was so excited to go there. And my mom was in love with Florida State from the time we went on our visit. So she was over the moon when I decided to go there. And then so that was in April, May that I committed. And, I started to have this cough probably the middle of May, right around like finals time for high school stuff. And I had this really bad cold cough, just didn't feel good. And then my cough just kind of lingered for a really long time. And so we tried, going to the doctor. I got an inhaler. I was on the Z-Pack. Like I did all these things. Finally, after like 3 weeks and high school tryouts were coming up. So this is beginning of August. My doctor was like, you know what, why don't you just go get a chest x-ray and let's see what's going on. And they, I guess, had suspicions that maybe it was like walking pneumonia. And I then was kind of like, okay, whatever, like we'll deal with it. We go get the chest x-ray, and I don't really remember this part, but my mom said that as we were leaving, the tech kind of like looked at us and was like, good luck. And now maybe she just said that totally out of like, like good luck with your results, move on. I don't know. But my mom, like thinking back, is always like, I think she may have seen it right then. So we leave the chest x-ray. My brother and dad are out of town for like a Boy Scout trip. So we were planning to just have like a girls' night, like bake cookies, watch movies, whatever. So we're just kind of like hanging out, going to the grocery store. And we get a call from the doctor, like, you need to go down to Children's right away. And kind of like, okay. And so we go to Children's, immediately taken back to a room. And I'm just sitting there like, what's going on? Like, yes, I had this cough, but I just played at nationals. I just gone to a Florida State volleyball camp. I'm fine. Like, I can still do everything. I just start coughing like every once in a while. And so I'm really confused what's going on. And the only other thing that I do remember is I couldn't like lay flat on my back to sleep. I had to sit upright. And my dad thought that this was like a tactic for me to stay down on the first floor to watch TV and not go to my room to go to bed. But genuinely, like if I laid down, I started coughing more and I felt like I couldn't breathe. So I would sleep on the couch so I could sit upright and be able to breathe, but fall asleep. So go to Children's Hospital, and they then tell us like, okay, you're going to go to this back room. We're going to draw some labs, and the oncologist will be back here soon. And at the time I was kind of like, who's coming back here? So my mom steps out in the hallway to talk with them. They come in, they start doing all these, like, talking to me, asking me all these questions. They kind of start like feeling different like parts of my body. And the main doctor that comes in, Dr. Ben, who is probably the greatest doctor I've ever had, says, like, you're so tall, like, do you play volleyball? And most people, when they see how tall I am, say basketball. So for him to say volleyball, I was like, yeah, I do. Why do you ask? Or, how did you come to volleyball, not basketball? Turns out he's a huge BYU men's volleyball fan, loves volleyball. And like, so we just started talking about all things men's volleyball. The Olympics were coming up, just all kinds of stuff, and immediately put me at ease, because if you know me, I do not like medical things. And so when he started talking about volleyball, I could just take a deep breath and be like, okay, whatever this is, we're going to figure it out. And he's going to understand like what my goals are and be able to help me get there. And so we're talking volleyball. He takes my mom and like the other doctors, they go out into the hallway and they talk about whatever they talk about, probably medical stuff. My mom comes back in crying. I had tried to call my dad a couple times, but because they were out camping, they had no service. And so he's not responding at all. And I'm just sitting in the hospital room, kind of freaking out, crying, like, what's going on? Like, what's wrong with me? And confused because I don't feel that bad. And I didn't have like any lumps or bumps on me. So they can't, I can't leave. So they bring me upstairs and like check me into a room on the oncology unit. And we're just kind of sitting there like, what's happening? So they tell us we're going to do biopsy and a couple other tests and stuff in the morning or a couple days later or something, but we got it moved up. So my mom calls my uncle and is like, can you go get, my dad so he knows what's going on and like he can come to the hospital. So all this is happening. I end up going to sleep. I'll insert pictures too as I'm talking of like exactly kind of what was happening. Thank you, Mom, for taking all these pictures, even though I may have not been happy in the moment that you were taking all these pictures. But I'll insert little things over here so you guys can see like what I looked like and what was going on. But then the next day kind of comes around and eventually we're getting ready for all these tests and they tell me I'm not allowed to eat, which I really enjoy eating. I like food. So to not be able to eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner and basically go a whole day without eating was not ideal. So I'm doing all these tests. They're running biopsies. They were going to do like they were going to go in and see if my like bone tissue had any at the time I didn't know, but they were trying to see if there's any cancer cells within the bones. And so I get done with all of these tests, come back to the hospital room, and I'm watching, and it's children's hospital, so I'm watching all kinds of Disney movies, super just chilling. I'm basically on a hotel vacation right now, just confused. And so I told my parents, I don't want to know what's wrong. I don't want to know what's going on. So they go out into another room with the doctors and they tell my parents what's happening. So during that time, I just was like, tell me what we need to do. I don't even need to know what's wrong. I just want to know what we have to do to get me back to volleyball. Like I have things to do. And this is, bothering me that I can't go do it because I'm pretty stubborn. So then they come back in the room and my parents are crying. So I was like, that could be either really good or really bad. And then they started smiling at me. And my dad says, like, it's the best, worst news possible. So that's when the doctors told me I had Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 2A. So I was only stage 2 and I was A because I didn't have certain symptoms that would have like progressed me to B. So I had a mass that was basically like within my whole like chest cavity. It was huge, but it was like a pancake, just kind of like fit through all of my organs and stuff. And that also explains why when I would lay down, I couldn't breathe because it was pushing down on some arteries and things. Again, the medical stuff is not my forte. So you'll have to bear with me on that. But maybe if I have Dr. Ben on, he can explain. But it was basically just pushing down on like my arteries and stuff. So I couldn't breathe. So I wasn't making that stuff up that I couldn't breathe. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean? Like, what now? And so Dr. Amber and then Dr. Ben, who were my lifesavers during that time, would come in. They came in later that night with like this huge binder of what medicines I'm going to be taking, all the symptoms, all the side effects, everything that can go wrong because they have to tell you all this stuff. So I'm laying on the bed and they're telling me all of these things. And I just kind of like rolled away from them because I didn't want to hear anymore. And my parents were in the room. I'm still a minor. I was only 16 at the time. 15, yeah, 16. And so I was still a minor, like my parents in the room, but I was tired of hearing all these things that were going to go wrong because I knew I was going to be fine and I was going to go play volleyball. And Dr. Amber kind of like took my hand and was like, it's going to be okay. Like, we just have to go over all this stuff. And so we got done with that. And a couple days later is when we started the chemotherapy process. So that first time that I was in the hospital, I was there for 2 weeks because I was there for a couple days. Then we got testing, and then you had to wait a couple more days to get everything ready. And then to take and like start the chemo treatment. And the chemo was like a 3-day thing. So I was there for 2 weeks and I was kind of in a smaller room. I mean, it wasn't too bad, but I set the record at the hospital for the most visitors in that 2 weeks and like people that were on my visitors list because I think at one point I had close to like 100 people on that list that were able to come. My high school team came, my club team came, family obviously was huge, so they came. Tons of friends, people I didn't even know, like from my dad's work came to visit. Just all kinds of people coming to like be support for myself and my parents, which was really cool. And my room was decorated with all kinds of posters and coloring book pages from my little cousins, just all kinds of things. And it was just a very scary but special time because I wanted to put on the brave face for everyone else, like that I was okay, because I didn't want people to treat me differently. Like if they came in and they were kind of like, hi Adrian, like they didn't want to just talk with me like how I was less than a week ago. So I made sure like when they came in, it was, hey, like, let's go, we can hang out, we can go over here to the game room, like all these things, because I didn't want them to feel like they had to walk on eggshells with me. And honestly, I think that helped me a lot too, just to like, I'm normal, it's okay. And I think it helped them a lot too, because they were able to just be like, okay, it's still Adrian, we can still talk to her. And then my 2 weeks were done. I did some like PT while I was there, and all the nurses were really confused. They were like, you're in here for 2 weeks and you're still like doing all this stuff on the bike. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, I feel fine, like, because nothing had really changed from being in there and not, other than I actually had the diagnosis now. So then I eventually get released. I'm able to come home, and that's when my hair started to kind of fall out. And this was an interesting thing because I didn't think it would affect me as much as it did, but it was very humbling to go through that because I had always had really long hair. So I eventually went in and I had someone cut it shorter, and then it continued to fall out. I was really like upset about it. I called, or my mom called the hairdresser and was like, can you like shave her head? Because I said, I'm going to shave my head. I'm not going to let cancer just like take this from me. Like, I'm going to do it on my own terms. And so we went in, she shaved my head. I had like a couple little hats already picked out, put the hat on, and we leave. We get home and I'm just kind of on the couch crying and moping and not being super happy, obviously, and warranted. Then about an hour or so later, I kind of hop up and I was like, all right, let's go shopping. And I guess my mom kind of was taken by surprise that I just kind of hopped up and was like, yep, we're good to go. Let's go. So we went out and I had my hat on and people looked or stared or I don't know, but I was not gonna again let cancer define my life or take away memories and moments that I could be making instead of just sitting on the couch being upset about it. So I still went to practices. I was their biggest supporter. I was trying to help coach them and, be a shoulder to lean on when they needed it. Went to all these games with them. I still wasn't able to go to school because of my blood counts and like my immune system. And it was kind of nice for me, honestly, because I didn't have to go to school. I was taking I only technically had to take 3 classes, but I ended up taking 4 just because I figured why not. So I had all my stuff online. Every once in a while, I would like go in and turn in my papers to them or like email it to them. And then I got to go to volleyball practice. So I was kind of living the life that fall, aside from once a month or so. Went to the hospital for my like vacations, as we started calling it, to get my chemo. And then I was good to go for another month. And I had a lot of cool experiences at the hospital. Like I got to meet some NFL Bengal players, got to make some cool connections with them. And then I also got to realize and see other kids that were in the hospital, like little kids, babies. And some of those kids, I'm sure, like their outlook wasn't as good as mine. And so it kind of gave me this perspective that even though I'm going through something really hard right now and it's not ideal, and not many high schoolers have to go through this, I knew that there was a light at the end of the tunnel and I was going to get out of the hospital. Like I wasn't going to be staying here forever. And so to see some of those other kids and families go through stuff was very eye-opening for me, and I think for my parents too, as they'd like run into parents in the hallways and stuff. But definitely gives you that perspective and like appreciation for life, and not just life, but even just like the little moments and the people that you're with. So that's always stuck with me. I don't think it really had that big of an impact right away, but as I kind of reflected on my time more, I think it sunk in a lot more. But I have so many stories of like in the hospital with my teammates visiting, that we can talk about later, like when they come on the channel. But that's kind of the gist of it for my 4 rounds of chemotherapy. And then I ended up having to go to get proton therapy. So because it was in my chest and they want to make sure, obviously, there's no more live cancer cells, that's not active anymore, they wanted to do radiation. But because it's in my chest with all the other important organs, this proton therapy is like a new treatment where basically it's a lot more specific on where they send the like the radiation, instead of just hitting everything equally. So they actually just opened one in Cincinnati like the year after I needed it, but I was able to go down to Jacksonville. And I picked Jacksonville. They had one in Baltimore and one in Chicago. But I was like, it's winter and I'm going to Florida State. Jacksonville's 2 hours away. Let's go there. So my mom and I went to Jacksonville and we were there for about a month and a half or so. And we got in contact with one of my mom's cousins, who were some of the sweetest people ever, that took us in, and they took great care of us. We were able to stay at their house and get a lot closer with them because I had never met them prior to us basically moving in with them. And it was just an awesome time to be with them, and then also to have such amazing support system in our life. And then I was able to go over to Florida State for a couple games, and the proton therapy was really cool because it was just, you go in for an hour, you lay kind of on this like bed. I don't know if we have pictures of it, but you like are laying on this bed and they swing you out into the middle of this big chamber thing, and then the radiation comes down and it like has your little map of where they're sending the radiation that almost sits right on your chest, and you sit there for like an hour, but you can't move. So they have this like netting that made a cast mask thing, which I do still have. It's kind of weird, but I still have that at my house, and it goes like over your head and shoulders so you don't move and you just lay there. And luckily, a lot of my appointments were at night, so I'd kind of almost like fall asleep while doing it. But good thing I'm not claustrophobic through all of this, because I had plenty of times where I was really close and in like close quarters with this machines for my medical reasons. But then let's see what happened after that. So then I was at the Jacksonville. So it was actually funny because it was a University of Florida Radiation Center. So every day that I went in, I made sure to wear my Florida State gear. And my doctor is a huge Gators fan, so we always went back and forth about, the Seminoles and the Gators. And it was really cool to meet those people, made a lot of great connections, was able to go to Universal. We got to go to a Jags game. So it was a lot of fun aside from the treatment, but even the treatment wasn't too bad. But then I finished my last round of proton therapy. I was able to ring the bell that symbolizes you're done with your treatments. And we got back to Cincinnati. We drove back, and it was a couple days before Christmas that we got back. So all of this took place from beginning of August through right before Christmas. And then also while I was in Jacksonville, one of my future teammates and a girl that I went to the Florida State camp with, actually, that previous summer, we were roommates at the camp. They lived in Jacksonville and they played at this club. So while I was doing my proton therapy, I also was training and practicing with them. We did lessons. I got to go to their team practices and work out with them. So it was definitely very interesting. Showing up, I don't know anyone. I barely know the two girls that I was going there to meet and hang out with, but going in there not knowing anyone, and I'm wearing a hat because I'm bald and have cancer, or finishing up my cancer treatments. But it was just definitely a very very interesting experience and put me way outside of my comfort zone, to say the least. So that, I think, kind of wraps up for the most part what happened with my cancer journey. I know there's a few things I've already missed or whatever, but a lot of good stories that I'm sure other people will come on and we can talk about then. So I get back and it's time to start practicing with my club team again. And, I'm still wearing my hat because my peach fuzz wasn't quite covering my head enough for my liking. And the only person besides my parents and doctors that ever saw me without my hat on is actually my best friend's mom, because she stopped by unexpectedly at the house. And as soon as she knocked on the door and I realized I didn't have my hat on, I sprinted upstairs. But I guess she was still able to see me through the little window by our door. So I never took my hat off until with my friends and stuff, until it was long enough to cover my head, which again, I'll insert pictures of what it looked like at the first tournament, because the first tournament was the reveal of my little peach fuzz head. And then after that, they told me, we're going to work you back into the lineup. We don't know how you're going to handle it. And I was like, okay. So at first I was only playing back row, which is fine, just setting. And I totally understood it. But the competitor in me was not too happy with subbing out and going to the bench. So there was one game where I was feeling good and I rotated to the front row, and whoever was supposed to come in for me didn't come up to the sub line. And I just stood in there like I wasn't supposed to come out. And that was pretty much it. I was back to normal and ready to go. And that's kind of how I played and still continue to play, because I don't want to ever come off the court. But get through those. I think I went through 2 or 3 tournaments and, playing good, feeling good. We're back to normal. And then we go to Windy City, the Chicago qualifier tournament. The very first point of the first match on the first day of this 3-day tournament, my teammate dives for a short ball and she's still on the ground when I go to try to set it. And the way that I tried to set it, I then ended up tripping over her and falling. I tried to catch myself, and I put my left hand down and try to catch myself. And I ended up breaking something really small in my wrist. I don't really remember what it was, but I played through that first set. It hurt, but it didn't hurt that bad. So I kept playing, and then we get to the last couple points of the set, and I go to set a couple balls to the middle, and the ball went nowhere because my wrist hurt so bad. So I told my coach, I was like, I can't set, my wrist hurts. So in between the first and second set, she tells my mom to take me to the training table to like get it taped or get it looked at. And as we were like getting over there and talking to the trainer, I started to get really lightheaded, which is normally a sign that like you broke something, like I don't know, something releases in your body and you feel lightheaded, like you're gonna pass out. And so I sit down and she's like, I think something's broken. She's like manipulating it, feeling, she's like, I think something might be broken. So we go to the Northwestern Hospital, get an x-ray, it's broken. And I think that I don't think they casted it. They just like wrapped it and gave me a sling. So again, another injury and I was out. And I probably did get hurt that time because the chemo like weakens your bones and stuff. That's probably the biggest reason why, because it could have just as easily not been broken, but maybe because I was more susceptible at the time, that's why it broke. But come back, hanging out for the rest of the tournament, talking to everybody. We end up leaving after the third day. I'm out for, I think it was 4 to 6 weeks. And at the same tournament, actually, my best friend, she got a concussion. So we were sitting on the bench and she had her like sunglasses on and I had my cast and I'm holding up my little broken hand. And it was a good time on the bench over there, our cripple crew. And then I was out, but then because it was my left hand at practices, I was still able to like serve at them. So I became kind of a serving specialist for that month or so, just to do anything I could to stay involved and to make my teammates better. And then I was fine. That's the end of my junior year. Senior year, I'm like, okay, it has to be it. Like that has to be the worst that I've gone through. After I broke my leg, my thoughts were like, every athlete has this comeback story, and this is my comeback story. Like I broke my leg and I was in a wheelchair. And then I got cancer and I was like, okay, this has to be it. And then I broke my wrist. I was like, all right, for real, this is probably it now. So senior year, have a great senior fall, having a lot of fun with my team. We were super young. It was a lot of sophomores and juniors on the team, and there were only 2 seniors, which is a very good like foreshadowing to how my 6th year at West Virginia went. But we'll get into that later. So then at one of the first tournaments, so I switched clubs my senior year, and I am in one of the first tournaments of the year, one of the first matches of the day. I think it might have even been the first match of the day. And I was in right back and I took off running for a ball that was in left front. And as I'm running, I hear a pop in my knee and I go down and I do like the ACL clutch, like where you grab your leg and like hold it. And so I'm kind of laying there for a minute. My coach is like, you're fine, get up. And I was like, I'm not okay. But then a doctor, like trainer, comes over, manipulates my leg, and he's like, everything feels pretty good. Like, I think you might be okay. I was like, sweet, that's all I need to hear. Maybe it's just a little meniscus tear. I'll be out a little bit and be back. Because at that point, I was supposed to leave to go down to Florida State in June, and this is April. So I was kind of on a time crunch. I needed to be okay to go in June because I wanted to play my freshman year. So I come back, I end up being able to get up. And then I was kind of walking around and walking was fine, but every once in a while it would give out. And I was like, oh, that's no big deal. It's just my meniscus. Like basically trying to talk myself out of any injury other than a meniscus tear. And so then throughout the day, I was still walking on it, just telling everyone like, oh, I just tweaked it. It's fine. I tweaked it. It's all good. And as the day keeps going, nothing's really changing. It's just every once in a while giving out. We go see a doctor the following day because it was a Sunday. The tournament was a Sunday. So on Monday, we go into the doctor's office and I think they just did an x-ray on it, but he manipulated it and said my ACL was torn. And again, like I said earlier, those are like the 3 worst letters an athlete can hear. So I kind of was in denial. I was like, no, it's not. I don't think it's my ACL. And I was like, if it's my ACL, I shouldn't be able to walk because that's kind of always what they say. Like most people can't walk after they tear their ACL. And then we go to another doctor, Dr. Colosimo, who did my mom's ACL and her shoulder back in the day. So we went to him and got his like second opinion, and they did a screen. They looked at the x-ray and said I tore my ACL. So I start crying, obviously, because now kind of all my hopes and dreams of playing my freshman year of college are shattered, because it's at least a 6 to 9 month recovery process and a major surgery. So he's like, it's going to be okay. I'm going to get you back to where you need to be, which is the same thing Dr. Ben and Dr. Amber told me. So I was like, yeah, like I have things I need to do. Like I have some big goals and big dreams, and this isn't going to stop me. Get the surgery, start all of the PT. I'm going to PT, pushing super hard. It obviously isn't easy, and there were times where I didn't want to, but at the end of the day, I knew I would regret it if I didn't, and that in the future, like if I waited now to push myself, in the future it's just going to be that much harder. So I had to keep reminding myself, like, it sucks right now and it hurts and it's not fun, but in the future I'm going to thank myself for doing it now instead of having to wait even longer to come back. So as I was going through the recovery, and finally, I was able to walk, I didn't have to use crutches anymore, was able to get the leg brace off. And then it was kind of like my last few weeks, I got my knee brace that I could wear when I was like competing and stuff. Camera kind of just like shifted, so if that's on the video looks weird, that's what happened. But I got my knee brace that I could wear when I was like playing volleyball and stuff. They talked to my trainer down at Florida State to come up with a plan to like help my transition from Cincinnati down there, and what they were going to do to be able to help me. And that's kind of where I'll leave off with this episode, just as far as like the timeline of going into Florida State. And that'll be in the next episode, is that 4-year journey down there. But yeah, my high school career was anything but simple and smooth. And I learned a lot of big life lessons during that time, whether or not I really realized it in the moment, or, as I went on, it kind of sunk in more. But I couldn't imagine other people going through this. I can barely imagine myself going through it. Yeah, my high school career was anything but easy, go with the flow. It was very much a challenging 4 years. Tested my determination for sure, and my commitment to volleyball and to wanting to play in college. I mean, I didn't luckily have to make the phone call to Florida State that I had cancer. My mom talked to them and they had my back through all of that. And then to also call them when I tore my ACL right before coming. It was definitely challenging, and I'm not going to sit here and say like it was the easiest thing ever, or that I didn't have times where I doubted it, because there were a few breakdowns that I had during the cancer journey where I would just start crying, kind of, frustrated, upset. It's hard, and the emotions just would get the best of me. But I always tried to put on a brave face for everyone else, and the only people I ever really talked to about it was like my parents. I didn't really tell my friends too much about it, just because I didn't want them to feel bad or whatever. But my mom did a pretty good job of kind of like, hey, she could use a friend today, like if you guys want to go get ice cream. And they were always there for me. And for me, it wasn't necessarily that I like had to tell them everything. I just appreciated them showing up, whether it was in the hospital room with like Skyline or ice cream or whatever, or just, coming over to the house to watch TV. Those were the moments that like I really appreciated. And, I think that's what helped get me through. And then on top of that, volleyball was my outlet, whether it was through the broken leg, the cancer, the ACL, whatever it was. Volleyball was always something I looked forward to going to, because I could escape reality no matter how scary it was at the time. It was my safe place, and going to practices and just being treated like a normal, like Adrian, like a normal player on the team, was something I looked forward to be able to go to and play the game I love, or be around the game that I love, and help my teammates, even if it was just shagging balls, even if it was just bowling balls in for drills, whatever I could do to stay involved really just made my day so much better. And being around my friends and teammates was incredible, and they were some of the best support system that I could have asked for during that time. My family was there every step of the way to make light of situations or, have a good laugh in the hospital room when things weren't going great. So yeah, I hope that this was like a little insight to my high school career. Again, I don't ever want it to come across like I'm bragging about, how hard my high school was, but I think it's an important story to share, and it's the start of this channel for athletes to share and have a safe place to share their stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if you guys have any like other questions about whether it's, the cancer, the broken leg, the ACL, any of it, recruiting, I don't care, anything that you guys want to know about, feel free to leave it in the comments below. And be sure to check out the Instagram pages for more about it. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week to talk about Florida State and the transition to college volleyball.